Why am I having visions of like Green Acres right now, right? You know, you have that someone who's used to this certain type of life, and then all of a sudden they're placed in somewhere else, and this is just, oh my goodness, oh, how uncivilized. But that's what happens when you're charged with sex crimes.
Well, nobody likes to go from sort of the toast of the town to the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center in Southern New York. It's not the nicest place to be. That isn't necessarily what Ghislaine Maxwell's complaint is. It's not that prison's yucky. It's that her conditions and how she's being held are different than a similarly situated pretrial detention inmate. And what that means is anybody else like her would be in general population and would not be subjected to the things that she says she's being subjected to. So she wrote that, well, her lawyers wrote that letter to Judge Allison Nathan, asking the judge to compel the department or the Bureau of Prisons to move her into general population. I mean, that's a little shocking, right? Because general population is not usually where alleged sex offenders, or certainly child sex offenders, fare well. And that there's a reason that she's asking for this. She says that in the current situation, she is being treated according to what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. And she says what's happening to her is because of what happened to Jeffrey. And they're going overboard to make sure that there's no suicide, that there's not another debacle that transpires. And so she's held in the shoe. She's in lockup. She's basically in isolated detention. Some people call it solitary, but it's segregated housing unit, SHU. And so she doesn't like that because she's being awakened regularly all night long. She says she's being subjected to all sorts of cell searches, not only that, but body scans, and that she's on suicide watch and has to wear special clothing for it, even though she's never, presented as suicidal. And she says that's really difficult. She also says it's extremely difficult for her to access the communication devices that other inmates could. Therefore, she says, I cannot communicate appropriately with my attorneys, and that is not helpful in me effectuating an assistance in my counsel. And so those are very important legal, words to use when you're appealing to have a change in your environment. So all of these things, were sort of fascinating, especially this whole notion about going into general population. And I wanted to know how she would fare. And I also wanted to know whether any of what she's saying really holds water. And there is one person who came to my mind right away. His name's Larry Levine. He is a prison consultant. He has done hard time, and he now counsels the soft and squishy among us, those who maybe go from the high society into a really, really tough spot in prison. He counsels them how to survive, how to manage, how to navigate the system. And so I called up Larry and I said, you got to help me understand Ghislaine Maxwell's requests of this judge and what they really mean. He is writing a book called Up the River, How to Survive in the Federal Slammer. He's also created a website called Pink Ladies. And guess what that does? That helps women to navigate prison. So here's my conversation with Larry.
It seemed an unusual request for Ghislaine Maxwell to ask to go into general population, but is that unusual?
And I was in MDC Los Angeles for 2 years. So it's kind of like a cookie cutter. The whole purpose of that facility, it's a high rise, is to support the court system. So when you're in GP, general population as they call it, mainline, you're on a floor with maybe 100, 125 people. It's not really general population. But when for that facility it is, but when you're in the SHU, the special housing unit, they don't call it solitary confinement, you're locked in for figure 23 hours a day. You really have nothing to do. The highlight is when you get your food. You don't know what time of day it is. You can kind of gauge things by when the meals come, and maybe you'll get a shower every 2 or 3 days. So she's in a screwed up existence. It's really playing with her mind. She has no activities. She's probably looking forward to legal visits, I would suspect.
I can imagine, especially even under COVID, that it would be a very, very uncomfortable existence. But by the same token, those who are accused of having sex with underage children, I thought they didn't fare well in general population. So what's the better of the evils, being locked away and alone, or being in with general pop and at risk?
Well, they call them chomos, child molester. That's the term that all the inmates use. You've got people that are high custody, medium custody, low custody, minimum custody, and they're all grouped together in a housing unit. If she was just at a regular institution, she would probably be locked up with other people that have similar crimes to hers. And they would warn all the other inmates, nobody touches the chomos. Because remember, the BOP, they're responsible for you, and they've got a bad rep already for handling the coronavirus, Epstein checking out early at MDC last year. So she's got a screwed up existence. There's no right or wrong, what would be better, what wouldn't. She would have a social experience if she was in general population. She might get the crap beat out of her, but she would have something to do.
So you brought up the Jeffrey Epstein issue, and so did she. In fact, her whole petition to be moved to general population is based on the fact she believes she's getting different treatment due to what happened to Jeffrey Epstein last summer. I'm wondering if there's some truth to that from the inside knowledge you have.
They're treating her the way they should have treated Jeffrey Epstein. It's not out of the ordinary. They were just really lax with Epstein. And I've read the reports where she's saying that there's special guards watching her and she's not getting the same treatment other inmates are. How would she know? She just got there. She's only really been in the shoe, so she has nothing to compare it to. And a lot of that Epstein, I mean, you saw pictures of his cell. The cell was a mess. They took him out of the shoe. They sent him to the psych ward. They're supposed to clean out your cell, empty it, inventory your stuff. Then they bring you back and they give you all your personal belongings back. Epstein's cell was a mess. There's no way in hell he would have had the time to accumulate all that stuff.
I should say the pictures that we're seeing are courtesy of 60 Minutes. It was an incredible image after, he was taken to the hospital. Just the number of orange sheets. I can't imagine how he had all those issued and how he could have possibly hanged himself.
They say that he died at MDC. The coroner pronounced him dead. But then they have pictures of him on a gurney being wheeled into a hospital. You could see his face. So think about this. If a coroner declared him dead at MDC, they'd have thrown him in a body bag and zipped him up, wouldn't they? You wouldn't be able to see his face. So there's something a little suspicious that's going on. But
let me ask you, though, how that pertains to Ghislaine Maxwell's existence. She says that she's awakened all night long for checks. She's on suicide watch, even though she's never presented as being a suicide risk. She says that she's getting body searches on a regular basis. And she says that they're making notes and even making notes as she's on calls with her attorney. Do you believe that?
Yeah, dotting their I's, crossing their T's. I mean, after what happened to Epstein, they don't want anything to happen to her. And the BOP routinely does at midnight, 3 a.m., 5 a.m., 7 a.m. Those are their overnight checks where they check out all
the BOP. What does BOP stand for?
Oh, the Federal Bureau of Prisons. The BOP, they're the ones, they're a Justice Department agency. They're who runs MDC. They routinely do these checks anyway. And I wondered for years, I mean, even in places I was at, why do they do these when people are locked into a cell? Best thing I could come up with is to keep the staff awake because the staff is lax, the staff falls asleep, and they don't want anything to happen to her. She's like their prize right now. Imagine if she turned up dead, strangled, hung, whatever it is, the heat that would come down on them. And she knows things, obviously, and pretty soon she's going to have to start talking and giving people up to get cooperation.
She claims that among those who are routinely keeping an eye on her are those who are not wearing the uniforms of the guards. And she is claiming that they are unknown staff members. What do you think that means?
BOP right now, due to COVID, hirings, I mean, Trump cut several thousand positions from the BOP. People are out sick. And they're bringing in staff members like administrators, counselors, case managers, unit managers. They're bringing in people in civilian clothes that don't normally wear a uniform to work the shoe. So that's not out of the ordinary.
one of the things that you've mentioned before about your experience in federal prison is that it was actually, I think you said, stress-free. Can you enlighten me? Is it
Well,
stress-free for some but not others?
I was in 11 different federal prisons over a 10-year period. I got hit with narcotics trafficking, securities fraud, racketeering, obstruction of justice, machine guns. I was like a troubleshooter for organized crime, an efficiency expert for the mob. I ensured more bang for the buck when crimes were being committed. For someone like me, it was a stress-free environment, a stress-free experience. MDC, that kind of existence when you're locked up, it's a lousy existence. There's a lot of stress, a lot of the unknown. It reached the point I just wanted to get sentenced and get the hell out of there. She's a privileged person. She's not a person from the streets, from the element of crime. So all of a sudden, she's thrown into this environment where she's essentially locked into a closet with a toilet and a bunk and a little window on the door that she could look out of. This isn't the kind of treatment and environment that she would be accustomed to.
Will she get her wish, and do you think that they'll put her in general pop?
No, I don't think so, because they need to protect her. Let's just play a game called What If. What if there are people, which I suspect there are, who she could give up information on? Somebody knows somebody who has an inmate there in the women's unit at MDC in New York. Somebody pays off someone on the outside, and mysteriously, she turns up dead. This stuff happens. Somebody gets to somebody, somebody turns up dead. They're not going to care that she doesn't like it there, and they're not going to take that chance. She's getting the normal treatment for somebody who is in a pre-trial, pre-sentence custody situation that she's in.
Oh, Larry, thanks so much for this. I really appreciate your insight. I mean, if anybody knows what it's like on the inside, it's you.
Sure thing, hon, anytime.
He's the only person I allow him to call me hon. But I love the way he describes himself. Larry Levine says, I'm a troubleshooter of organized crime and an efficiency expert for the mob. Like, wow. He's got a lot of knowledge, though, and I'll tell you, it's valuable stuff, and people pay top dollar to get that information if they are facing that kind of a sentence. I do want to add one thing, Vinny, and that is that Ghislaine Maxwell had some other requests that she was making of this judge. She wants the judge to tell the prosecutors to unseal the names of those 3 accusers. The reason she's in the slammer in the first place. One of them is already known, so that's a bit surprising. But she says, I want those accusers made public, which is an unusual request.
Wants them made public? I mean, not just for her knowledge, but for public knowledge?
Yeah, she wants them to be made public. And the request that her lawyers, the request they're making is that the accused, those who have accused Jeffrey Epstein number into the hundreds. And she says that the incidents that are pertaining to her particular indictment happened, I think 25 years ago. So she says, my God, 25 years ago, hundreds of potential accusers in the Jeffrey Epstein orb. How am I to know who these accusers are? Well, I'll give you one hint. One of the accusers is Annie Farmer. She was only 16 when she was abused by Jeffrey Epstein. And she's now Dr. Annie Farmer, and she's public with her story. But the other 2 have not been made public. So the prosecutors have to answer to this request and this letter by tomorrow. So we will see what the prosecutors have to say about being asked to unseal the names of the other 2 accusers.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, everyone's going to know it's a public trial. I mean, at some point it comes out, but we shall see. Ashley Banfield, thank you so much.